Well, wow. First, thank you everyone who came out tonight. I feel truly honored that so many educators are here. I'll do my best to make this as informative, practical, and valuable for you all. So to begin, let's go over our agenda for the evening. First, we will start with learning about what it means to be an evidence-informed educator. We will discuss concepts such as the instructional hierarchy, cognitive load theory, and how it should inform our planning in all subject areas. Then we will dig into essential literacy skills. With so much on an educator's plate, we need to be able to determine what is the most critical content for literacy success, so we can ensure all of our students get equitable access to that content. Then I will show you a few different sample blocks and how we can arrange them in different ways with the previous concepts in mind. Finally, we will discuss about putting it into practice. Teaching is challenging work, so we will discuss ways we can improve our efficiency to improve educator workload while providing effective instruction. So let's begin with the evidence-informed educator. These are research-proven models that are essential learning for all educators. These concepts have helped me transform my teaching to being more effective while improving my workload as a busy educator. To begin, we are going to explore some of these evidence-informed practices. These 5 things have completely transformed how I teach in my classroom and have been essential to my students and my own success. These include the instructional hierarchy, cognitive load theory, explicit instruction, opportunities to respond, and deliberate practice. Let's take a few minutes and dig into each one of these. The instructional hierarchy is a model of skill acquisition. The hierarchy has been researched for decades. When we learn something new, we move through a series of predictable stages. It's important for educators to be aware of the instructional hierarchy, since we are the most effective when our instruction matches the student's current level of proficiency. The hierarchy begins at the acquisition stage. At this stage, students are slow and inaccurate as they have limited knowledge of the target skill. Instructional strategies that are most useful to increase accuracy include explicit and systematic instruction, immediate feedback, and opportunities for guided practice. In the fluency stage, students are now accurate with the target skill, but they are slow and not yet automatic. They require additional opportunities to practice the skill and build accurate and fast performance. Instructional strategies that are most useful to facilitate fluency include purposeful and varied practice opportunities, feedback, goal setting, and performance-based reinforcements. In the generalization stage, students apply and practice this fluency in new contexts and settings. Instructional strategies that promote generalization include providing a range of tasks and activities with varied levels of difficulty, providing cues for generalization, and slowly fading adult support. In adaptation, students can perform the skill across settings with accuracy and proficiency. Instructional strategies that facilitate adaptation include presenting new tasks that use this previous knowledge, think alouds, and performance feedback on the skills application. Once we have acquisition, once we have that fluency, then students can generalize and adapt it. According to the information processing model, our senses filter out much of the information around us. Some of this information goes into working memory. With effort, the learner can move the information from working memory to long-term memory for future retrieval. This change in long-term memory is learning. In the process, working memory is the bottleneck. It can limit the path of information into long-term memory. Too much load on working memory can prevent information from being stored, causing cognitive overload. Educators can make instructional decisions to reduce or optimize that load and improve student learning. To prevent cognitive overload, It is important that we match our instruction to the instructional stage of the student. When a student is in the acquisition stage with a skill, explicit instruction is a must. When it comes to teaching children to read, the manner in which these components are delivered are important. Explicit instruction has been validated over and over in the research as the most effective and efficient procedure for teaching, particularly when learning new skills and strategies. The Ontario language curriculum addresses the need for explicit, systematic instruction of foundational knowledge and skills. All students benefit from explicit instruction, but for some students, it is essential for their reading, writing, and spelling development. ONlit has its very own module just for explicit instruction. I would highly recommend this module to you to help you become better informed about what explicit instruction is supposed to be. An important feature, and sometimes misrepresented feature, of explicit instruction is that it must be interactive. Dr. Anita Archer says it best in this short video.
All instruction has to be interactive. I say something, you say something, I say something, you say something, I write something, you write something, I do something, you do something, I say something, you say something. It never can be I say something, 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 see you tomorrow. Raise your hand if some of your children, under those circumstances, might check out. Raise your hand if that might happen. So that's what we're going to discuss, is how to have that great engagement through active participation. But you know, it's even possible that some of your thoughts might go somewhere else today. So we're going to do the same active participation here that you would do in your class.
So this leads us to another important practice, creating opportunities to respond. As Daniel Willingham says, memory is the residue of thought. In order for students to chunk their memories to support long-term retrieval, students need to be thinking about the content. To ensure this thinking happens in my classroom, we do not raise hands during explicit instruction. I use cold calling, but unlike the name, cold calling is not cold. Instead, they are intentionally created opportunities where all students are expected to think. It is never a gotcha. It's an expectation that everyone matters in the room. As an educator, I give think time, clear and predictable prompts to create successful opportunities for every student to respond. Later, we will watch a video of a vocabulary lesson showing this idea in action. To add to this, I want to share these numbers. In a 30-minute lesson, if we use hand raising and have one student respond at a time, at best, you might get 1.5 responses per student. And that is if every student participates. Often you'll have only a few raising their hands and many that will not. So at best, that adds up to 270 a year. However, through whole group responses, that number grows significantly. This practice, when done effectively, is essential for students who require these additional practice opportunities. Finally, let's discuss deliberate practice. Practice serves to promote chunking, a cognitive process by which familiar parts are put together in efficient and more easily remembered ways. When we create practice opportunities for our students, knowledge can be chunked together in working memory, limiting the probability of cognitive overload. The type of practice needs to match the student's skill development in the instructional hierarchy. If the student is still in the acquisition stage, they need practice opportunities that are blocked together with intensity and with lots of feedback to ensure accuracy. As students shift to the fluency stage, then practice needs to be interleaved with other content, spaced over time, with feedback as required. Deliberate practice is essential. A great paper discussing practice opportunities is What Do We Mean by Practice by Jamie Peevler, found in Perspectives of Language and Literacy, Volume 49, Issue 1. And actually, this entire issue of Perspective is a fabulous resource on the power of practice. So now that we know more about these important evidence-informed practices, how do we put this research into practice? We do this with instructional routines. We need to design learning environments that allow us to match our instruction to the different stages in the instructional hierarchy. We need to create learning environments that reduce cognitive load. Instructional routines are a must. Smart and Glaser describe these as simple yet rigorous. Anything that is an essential literacy skill should be taught with an instructional routine. If it is essential, we need to ensure students have the working memory available to think and work with that content. We need to make sure our expectations are clear, predictable, and consistent. We need to create tidy and calm and welcoming environments so students are thinking about the learning and not the distractions around them. As Anita Archer says, we need to teach with a perky pace, small sequential steps at a perky pace where all students keep moving forward. Understanding the instructional hierarchy and cognitive load theory does more than just support academic learning. When teachers provide a well-organized, demanding yet supportive, affectionate, and comforting learning environment that promotes autonomy through consistent rules, students develop better self-regulation skills, especially those with fewer competencies in the area. Using simple but rigorous instructional routines, having clear, predictable, consistent routines, and having an organized, tidy, and welcoming environment for those routines, these things are essential for some students to be successful in our classroom. We do not need fancy buzzwords or to use important instructional time for relationship building activities. We build relationships through evidence-informed instruction so all students can succeed. Now, all these things are essential for student learning, but educators matter in this process too. Smart and Glaser also discuss the importance of not only having teaching methods that get results, but ones that require minimal effort and planning. Educators work hard every day, making hundreds of decisions and supporting the needs of their students, other students around the buildings, their building, their colleagues, their families. We also need to make decisions that make our lives easier as well. If an educator cannot implement a plan with fidelity, in the long term, it just won't happen effectively, and even worse, will lead to teacher burnout. We need to choose teaching methods that are not only evidence-informed, but also support educator workload and well-being. As we go through essential literacy skills and examples of literacy blocks, reflect on how these ideas show up in the plans. These plans are designed to be evidence-informed to improve student learning, but also to support educator workload and well-being. So now let's look into essential literacy skills. Essential literacy skills are the things that all students require to become successful readers and writers. These skills are critical as they are needed for future reading proficiency. This infographic provides a comprehensive visual guide to structured literacy, an evidence-based approach to teaching language and literacy. It illustrates both the how and what of structured literacy. In the what to teach, we find critical literacy skills. These include phonology, orthography, morphology, syntax, and semantics. Below this, we see the how to teach. These are evidence-informed features of targeted, planned, and purposeful instruction. This includes explicit and systematic instruction that is cumulative and instruction that is interactive with targeted feedback. All of these elements are driven by data that is reliable and valid. Scarborough's reading rope is a model developed by Dr. Hollis Scarborough in 2001 to explain the complex intertwined processes involved in skilled reading. The model illustrates how two major strands, word recognition and language comprehension, work together to create proficient reading. The word recognition strand focuses on decoding skills. It includes subcomponents like phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition of familiar words. Mastery of these skills leads to automatic and effortless word reading. The language comprehension strand emphasizes understanding meaning. It includes background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. As these subcomponents develop, readers become better at interpreting and engaging with the text. The model shows that both decoding and language comprehension are essential for fluent skilled reading. Weakness in either strand can hinder overall reading proficiency, highlighting the need for instruction that addresses both word recognition and language comprehension when planning our language block. Now, planning for the essentials. Has anyone ever been awake on a Sunday night looking through Pinterest to find tomorrow's plan? Full disclaimer, I had a time when I listed Pinterest as a resource in my long-term plans. These ideas are created by educators who are doing the best they can with the information they have. But for me, I just can't keep up with the searching, laminating, organizing, fixing, and constant behavior management that many of these activities take. Now I use the reading rope to determine what is essential in my classroom. I ensure I take time for both language comprehension and word recognition strands. I know that my year will be cumulative. We will build on these skills every day as we work towards our goals. I plan an instructional routine for these essential skills, one that is simple and rigorous that I can use throughout the year with little prep. I give feedback and celebrate every small step so their success is visible, motivating them forward. No more searching and hours of prep work. I have a few evidence-informed routines that I can adapt and update as we grow. Next, I will share a few of these essential literacy skills and the routines that align with them. So currently, this is how I have my classroom organized on a daily basis. We always begin with our oral language routine. This involves a read aloud, which I find a calming and beautiful way to start our day. Then we get down to business and we go through our review and practice routine, celebrating this daily grind. After this, we explicitly teach and practice a new skill in our scope and sequence. We then slow it down and we do rotations in small groups. I always finish with our writing lesson. We always go through in this order, but the duration of each can change slightly depending on my focus that day. Sometimes my oral language routine will be a little shorter, so as I may need to spend more time on writing that day. I do try to always keep our review and practice and small group times consistent though, as I feel it's essential for my most vulnerable students. So our oral language routine is focused on the language comprehension side of the rope. We are always reading a chapter book read aloud in my class. We all have great memories of our teachers reading to us, so I try to bring this memory to my students every day. Through read aloud, we will focus on vocabulary, background knowledge, language structures, and verbal reasoning skills. Now, onto the routine. This resource by Stephanie Stoller is a helpful guide when planning for a read aloud. Before we start, I will model a think aloud about what we have read so far, intentionally modeling retell, summarizing, predicting, and self-monitoring. Next, I'll implement Anita Archer's explicit vocabulary routine. To begin, I will show the students a card with the target word on it and tell them the student-friendly definition. After a few choral repetitions, I'll tell the students to listen for the word in the read aloud. During reading, they will shout out the word when they hear it. I then repeat the definition again and how it applies in the sentence, and then keep reading. Afterwards, we will follow up with the routine linked in this video. This is an explicit routine with a lot of student participation. Students say the word and definition out loud multiple times, and then use the word in a sentence stem. I use the same template each week, so the format stays simple and consistent. This is an example I did last week on the word brief. I used the website wordsmith.com to help me find quick student-friendly definitions and sentence stem examples. I will give students the sentence stem and have them turn and talk. While I listen, give feedback, and support students, I collect a few student examples. When we return to the whole group, I call on students to share their sentence stem. This way, I can ensure all students get the support they need and the opportunity to use the vocabulary successfully. Some of the great examples they came up with this sentence were, we only had a brief moment together because I was late for the bus. Or we only had a brief moment together because supper was on fire in the oven. Afterwards, I hang up the card on our door frame. This way, other students and staff can see the word. Everyone is encouraged to use the word in our conversations. Students are celebrated when they do. It becomes an exciting opportunity for students to use new and interesting vocabulary in authentic situations. Now let's take a look at opportunities to respond in action. This is the vocabulary routine by Anita Archer that I just discussed. You'll notice there are a lot of OTRs, and they are constructed in a way to promote thinking, engagement, and inclusion. Archer gives prompts, think time, and clear signals, chooses individuals to respond when she knows they can be successful, and gives immediate feedback throughout the routine. There are no hands being raised, but instead a community built on strong instruction, high expectation, and consistent routines to ensure all students can be successful. We will only watch the first 3 minutes, but just in that 3 minutes, notice how many OTRs there are created by Dr. Archer.
So looking up here, so we're going to expand on some of our vocabulary words, and the first word is what, everyone? Discard. And part of speech, it is a verb. And read the definition. If you discard something, you get rid of it because you no longer want it or need it. Okay, so when I get rid of something and I throw it away, another word for that is what, everyone? Discard. In fact, the synonym is what, everyone? Throw away. So if I clean up this room, as you two did this morning, you cleaned it up, and they found some paper and some pencils that needed to be thrown away. They did what, everyone? They discarded them. Hey, and so looking here, and read it with me, everyone, and starting here. What are some things that you should discard? Okay, and so everybody be thinking for a moment of your bedroom and some things that you need to discard. And begin by saying what, everyone? I should discard. My turn first. So I have a basement that is just filled with old books that no one wants. It's filled with overhead transparencies that teachers don't use. I need to, what, everyone? Discard them. I have cards. Every card that's been sent to me, I'm 64, every card that's been sent to me since I was like 5 years old, I have kept. And I have boxes and boxes of them, and I probably should discard them. Okay, and so first ones, then twos. Tell your partner something that you should discard and start with, I should discard. First ones, then twos, and go.
Notice how she's moving around the room.
I should discard old papers.
Absolutely.
I should discard my clothes out on use and give it to charity.
Excellent. Okay, looking up here, and big voice your sentence.
I should discard my clothes out on use to charity.
Excellent. So you're not going to just throw them away. You're going to discard them, get rid of them, but they're going to go to charity. Excellent. Okay, well, looking here, and
This style of teaching is very different than how I was prepared. It seemed impossible at the start, but the more I prepared, practiced, and developed strong routines with my students, this level of engagement and participation becomes the normal. You can go back later and watch more of this 17-minute video to see the routine in its entirety.
Yeah.
Here we go. In addition to this, some days I will focus our read aloud on syntax or verbal reasoning. I will use a think aloud with my students, intentionally sharing how and why I was confused and how I monitored my comprehension, went back and reread, and then changed my expression to match this new understanding. A few great resources on ONlit include Thinking About Comprehension with Nancy Hennessy and The Syntax Party with Margie Gillis. These are helpful resources for you to learn more about syntax and how it can be integrated into your lessons. After our oral language routine, we move into our review and practice routine. During this time, we mostly focus on word recognition, including decoding and encoding, sight recognition, fluency, and transcription practice. This routine is essential for ensuring students get the practice opportunities they need for growth. These are the skills the students are accurate with, but need multiple practice opportunities to become fluent with. These routines are simple, but rigorous, so students can focus their cognitive load on the literacy skills they are practicing. It has actually become a great motivator in my class. Predictable, consistent, set up for success. The students thrive on it. So before we start this routine, I always emphasize to the students what our purpose is. That our purpose is practice, and that if we practice every day, it leads to success. I also emphasize how quick this is, and if we get started right away, we will be done in no time. Every day we begin with our daily pen review. Originally, the idea came from the OGA Classroom Educator course, but I have adapted it slightly to become a daily routine for a classroom full of students. We use pen because if we make a mistake, it is no big deal. We just strike it out and keep going. We don't use valuable time erasing. We normalize that mistakes happen, but we just have to correct it and move on. And I'd also like to point out that the student is using a pencil in this picture. I noticed that afterwards. So we're flexible thinkers in our classroom. I have the PDF projected on the panel so I can annotate the work over top of it. Having the exact same document on the screen as what the students have in front of them is another way we can reduce cognitive load for our students. We start with 30 seconds of alphabet practice. I often give the students a whole class goal, such as, today our goal is to get all of our letters on the baseline, or today our goal is to make all the small parts small, modeling this to the students on our panel. Then we practice for 30 seconds, and I circulate and give targeted feedback on letter formation. I can't get to everyone, but since we do this every day, I do eventually get to everyone who needs it. Afterwards, I ask the students to circle their best letter, and I celebrate a few of them. There is nothing more fun than giving a shout out to a student on how great of a job they did on that G. Next, we restart the timer for another 5 minutes. I dictate and model sounds, words, and a sentence. For me, I use the review sections from a UFly manual. I target different skills based on the needs I'm seeing in my class. The students are always engaged in this practice, as it's only 5 minutes, and they love celebrating afterwards, saying, wow, look how much work we did in just 5 minutes. As the year progresses, I will adjust the rest of the routine based on the class need. We will do code pack, which is just whole group flashcards of letter sound correspondences and common morphemes. I have done this on a Google slide that we click through or with large cards that I hold up. This is quick, 1 minute tops. Eventually, I will add in a 2-minute fluency grid routine. Fluency grids are a great way to build automaticity and word recognition. One way I differentiated this task is when I created the grid for our weekly practice, I double-sided the grids. One side was single syllable words and the other was multi-syllable words, focusing on the same skill within our scope and sequence. Students could pick what side they practice with. It was a manageable way to differentiate to the different fluency needs of my students. On the ONlit library, there are available grids for you to download. Phrasing cards or sentence pyramids are another helpful tool for students building their fluency reading sentences. I had some students use this instead of fluency grids. While the rest of the class was doing their grids, this group joined me and we used these to practice this specific skill. It was a low prep way to help differentiate the practice for this group of students. Repeated reading is an evidence-informed practice because it helps improve reading fluency, comprehension, and confidence. This process strengthens word recognition, promotes automaticity, and enhances retention of new vocabulary. As students become more familiar with the text, they can engage deeper with its content, leading to improved overall literacy skills and better long-term academic outcomes. Today, I'm not going to dig into repeated reading. That's a whole nother webinar, but there are links in the chat to trusted resources about repeated reading. Now that students have had the opportunity to build their oral language skills and review and practice previously taught skills, now let's get into some new content. During my new content lesson, we focus on word recognition, fluency, syntax, and sentence writing. When teaching new content, students are in the acquisition stage of instruction and require explicit instruction. As seen by Anita Archer, we need to provide instruction that is a perky pace. A common question one might hear, though, isn't it too fast, especially for our learners with processing or working memory difficulties? Not at all, actually. It is the opposite. This pace of instruction is essential for these students. Students with these difficulties need more opportunities to respond and practice to help chunk knowledge into long-term memory. However, it is essential that we make this perky pace more accessible for all of our students. We can do this by using small, manageable chunks, sequencing them from simple to complex, and using clear and consistent routines and expectations. To reaffirm about building relationships from earlier, we can build trust with our students by making learning accessible through evidence-informed practices. So now let's dig into the new content. A key shift in grade 2-3 is the shift from reading and spelling single syllable words to more complex multi-syllable words. This IES guide has great information to support students through this shift. ONlit has also created this resource. I'm just going to click through so it's up for teaching multi-syllable word reading. During the acquisition stage, students will need lots of explicit instruction using this strategy with accuracy. Then, as the students become fluent, they will need to apply the strategy with less guidance, and eventually reading big words without the strategy at all, using instant word recognition. What's even more valuable about this resource? It can be used in all subject areas: math, science, social studies, music, phys ed, and health. It can be used as a tool by all educators to become teachers of reading. Now on to spelling. Spelling is a crucial part of our new content lesson. Spelling is the glue that helps chunk word recognition into long-term memory. These resources by Pam Kastner may be helpful as you explore spelling instruction further. You may need to focus first on their spelling accuracy of single syllable words. You can do this by segmenting in spelling, using sound sorts and word chains. However, as soon as you can, begin shifting towards multi-syllable words. Students need many practice opportunities, and we can focus on challenging letter sound correspondences within these words. We also need to practice spelling at the sentence level. Sentence dictation is a daily practice in my classroom. Some years, I have begun this practice using whiteboard sentence strips. These are an inclusive and safe way to get started, as students can just erase and fix any errors as they go. Then we move to paper, practicing writing longer and more complex sentences as the years progresses. These whiteboard strips can also be really helpful scaffolding tool as well. In other subject areas, I may grab one and scribe for a student what they want to write, but then it is their job to use the strip to write their own answer. They get the support they need and the writing practice they needed. Linked here are 2 templates that I use in my classroom for daily multi-syllable spelling practice and sentence dictation, and they're now available on the ONlit library. Now let's discuss morphology. ONlit has an excellent module on why morphology matters and how to provide this instruction in our classrooms. For me, I try to embed morphology instruction throughout all of our routines. Once I have taught a new morpheme, it will become a part of all of our other routines. Bi-weekly, I'll use a spelling time to focus on morphology. During this, I'll explicitly teach the piece, how it is spelled, what it means, and then we will practice with it. After this, it will become a part of all of our routines. I model with students how I notice these pieces in words to break them down into chunks. We will use the ONlit multi-syllable word reading strategy and post the prefixes and suffix we have learned around it. Once explicitly taught, I embed morphology into all reading and writing opportunities. Sorry. Another important feature of my new content routine is fluency. Students need fluency instruction to support effortless reading. ONlit has a great module on fluency for you to learn more. Also, anything by Dr. Jan Hasbrick is a trusted resource on how to provide fluency instruction for your students. Newly added to the resource library is a new resource called Partner Rating, Making It Effective. This 30-minute video outlines how I use partner reading to provide fluency instruction and practice opportunities into this section of our language block. In the resource, I explain about the why and how of our partner reading, about the different types of partner reading, and how they can be used for different stages of fluency learning, and tips on how to put this into practice in your classroom. I am only touching on this component right now, but please dig into fluency more, as it is critical for your students, because when students become accurate and fluent readers, then they can begin to generalize this skill toward our final goal, reading comprehension. Now let's move on to the next routine in our day, small group instruction. First, these groups need to be purposeful. This is our opportunity to target the essential literacy skills that students need most for future reading success. These groups need to be intentional. These groups are not designed as a fun activity or a time to check in. They are intentionally planned to give students an additional dosage of Tier 1 instruction. Some students need greater intensity of instruction during the acquisition or fluency stages to help them move forward. We can do this by giving students a smaller group to learn in, being more explicit and systematic, and just giving students the more repetitions that they may require. Small group instruction can also be used to fill in the specific skill gaps that the educator may have teased out during screening and diagnostic assessments. These groups are data-based. Our screening data allows us to find the who, an estimate of who may need additional instruction. Then using our diagnostics, we can refine those groups so we can match our instruction to those specific needs. To bring it all together, we can use our progress monitoring tools to fine-tune that instruction to ensure that it is effective and let us make changes in the intensity if needed. Small group instruction is an essential part of our day where I can attempt to close literacy gaps using my Tier 1 instruction. Now, here's the big question for most educators. What is the rest of the class doing during small group instruction? Now that we know more about the instructional hierarchy and cognitive load theory, we can use this learning to facilitate more informed instructional decisions during this time. If we want students to be working independently, we need to plan things that the students can be independent with. These activities need to be geared towards the fluency and generalization stages of instruction, where students can work with less guidance. They need to be grounded in an instructional routine, so students can so students know exactly what to do and how to do it. With this learning, I no longer try to plan a variety of centers. I select a few good routines and stay consistent throughout the year. The students are happy because they can be successful with the routine each day. In my classroom, we call it rotations. There are 5 options: reading, writing, partner, tech, and teacher. Let's look at some examples of each. So first, reading. During reading, students do just that. Students are allowed to choose whatever they would like to read. They can choose from authentic or decodable books from the classroom, the book they got from the library, a magazine, a catalog, books we constructed as a class during writing, or from my picture book read-alouds. I always leave my read-alouds on the ledge at the front of the room so students can enjoy the story again after I've read it to them. So yeah, sometimes students choose books that they might not be able to read yet independently. I'm okay with that. These rotations are 8 to 10 minutes long, and sometimes students just want to curl up and enjoy the pictures in a beautiful book. As my Tier 1 instruction does its work, eventually all students are able to choose texts that they can read independently. Now next, writing. This is a tricky one. Often our students are at very different stages of writing proficiency in our classrooms, so it's hard to find activities that match the different instructional needs of all of our students. Lately, I have given my students 2 options. We have gray hand muscle duotangs. These are just printing practice sheets. After all the hard work we do leading up to rotations, all different levels of students enjoy signing up for writing and just practicing in their gray duotangs. There is a predictability and calmness to it. Then we have orange duotangs for writing. In these, I have been using these simple squiggle sheets I found online. Right now, I will write a new irregular word we have learned on the sheet. Students finish the picture and then have to write a sentence using that word. Once I've explicitly taught conjunctions, we will do the same task using conjunctions, pushing the students to write more complex sentences. They love doing this, and we started creating books of all of our sentences. Sometimes we'll also use this rotation as a time for students to catch up on unfinished work. Now, partner. Oh, partner. Partner can be a challenging management task. We have to design tasks that support fluency or generalization, but ones that students can do efficiently without going off task. Recently, I have adjusted to a very simple concept. For partner, you can do reading or writing, but just with a partner. The expectation does not change. The what does not get to change, but now you just get to share that with a partner. This has also been helpful because our strong partners help students practice what is expected of them when they go to work independently. It has decreased my workload as well, as now I do not have to plan another task. Lots of educators have great ideas for games and activities students can do with a partner. But right now in my classroom, this simple practice has been working for us. And finally, technology. This one's pretty simple. We get some tech time. I keep it as simple as possible. Epic. That's it. Other years, though, when I had 5 iPads, this year I have some Chromebooks, I did use QR codes that students could scan to get specific lessons found on wordwall.com. This is one you will need to design based on the technology you have available to you. But I find keeping the options limited is a good practice to ensure the entire class can be successful. An essential part of rotations is behavior. Years ago, I used a book that many educators have probably heard of, Daily 5. Although I do not recommend this resource for instruction, I still do use some of the behavior practice strategies that I learned from those days. They spend a few weeks reviewing and practicing expectations with the students. They use consistent language and how they explain and reinforce those expectations. They start small and build stamina with the students so they can be independent for longer amounts of time. They use positive reinforcement to celebrate student success. The learning from that part of my career is still applicable here to create independent students during rotations. So then I can use evidence-based instruction with my small groups. Now onto the last part of our language block, writing. It is essential to have time set aside just for writing, but also to have writing embedded throughout our instruction. There is only so many minutes in the day, so I try to embed writing opportunities throughout our routines and subject areas. As seen in previous routines, you can see writing is embedded throughout. We have instruction and practice of transcription, spelling, and sentence writing throughout our review, new content, and small group instructional routines. All these little chunks of practice can add up to big gains. So I will begin a short 5 to 8 minute sentence writing lesson routine. This doesn't start usually till the end of September, start of October, just because I'm spending more time building all my structures in September. This also does not often happen on Mondays as we get settled back in and introduce our new content, but I try not to miss it the rest of the week. We focus on grammar and syntax, using ideas I have learned from the Writing Revolution and the Syntax Project. When introducing a new sentence writing skill, I use familiar content that the students can think with. I give students time to think and talk with one another so they can construct the sentence orally before they go to write. In these examples, we learned how to use the conjunction however, but in the familiar context for my students about having a campfire. When given the instructional support, all students get the opportunity to construct and share great ideas. Once the students are accurate with the skill, then we can begin to apply it with new content from our other subject areas. In these examples, I have already explicitly taught these concepts of sentence expansion and keywords into a complete sentence using familiar content like the campfire example. Now we use this routine with new content and use writing as a way to reason with and make connections with that new content while also practicing writing. We then use these routines to lead to bigger projects. After reading and learning about several famous structures, students then work together to write great sentences. Each day they wrote one sentence about a specific question word, the what, where, why, or how. Each day they crafted one great sentence. At the end of the week, they put those sentences together into these pieces. Chunking writing like this, using a structured routine, allowed me to give feedback to students throughout the week, so no one was left behind, and everyone was ready for the big writing day. They are also proud to share their writing about new content they have learned. Up next for me is to embed more self-regulated writing strategies into my writing instruction. To do this, I am beginning to implement learning from Think SRSD. So far, we are just beginning, but we have learned how to write just statements like these. Eventually, this will lead to longer pieces of writing, built on a foundation of handwriting, spelling, and sentence writing instruction, so students can bring their ideas and voice into their writing. Your instructional context matters. As you collect data and learn about the strengths and next steps of your students, you will begin to make instructional decisions that match that group of students. There is no one perfect language block, but these ideas can support you making instructional decisions that match the instructional context of your classroom. So now with all that, let's move on to some examples of how we could organize these into different schedules. This will be quick, as we have discussed the pieces in depth. This is just examples of how it could be ordered in a school day. So in the first example, The language block is scheduled for the middle of the day. It follows the sequence we have discussed earlier. In this example, partner reading for fluency practice is distributed 3 times every 8 to 10 minutes during the new content learning. These partner reading opportunities also act as a body break for students as they get to move around to a new location in the room. Additional writing was also embedded in other areas of the curriculum, as the educator taught all those subjects as well. In example 2, we see a very similar layout. However, it varies in how fluency practice is scheduled. In this option, partner reading is embedded as a 1 minute or as a 7-minute repeated reading routine. This class profile had difficulties with transitions, so the decision was made to do one extended fluency routine to limit the number of transitions and improve efficiency for the entire group. In example 3, we have a unique situation. In this situation, the language teacher is scheduled to leave the classroom for 10 to 20-minute blocks of time to do reading intervention groups at a different grade level. The afternoon teacher for the class, who teaches math, science, and social studies, is covering this time. To make the time most effective for the students, they have decided to co-plan a sentence writing lesson that is integrated with the content they are learning in science and social studies. Together, they collaborate to make their writing practice align with their new learning in these other subjects. It will be tricky to collaborate, but with a clear scope and sequence and good communication, they can do it. And in example 4, we see a complex scheduling block. This is not ideal, but it does happen when a language teacher sees their preps distributed throughout the day with no predictable pattern. However, using our instructional routines, we can bring some consistency to our students. You will see that each day still follows the same order, but with some breaks in between. In this example, rotation 1 and 2 are split to make the time fit into the time allotted. We have also added the 60-minute math block as well to show you the entire day. Despite this irregular schedule, we can find ways to bring consistency to our students' day. So now that we are all experiencing cognitive overload ourselves, let's look into some tips that might make it easier, or that made it easier for me to put it into practice. One tool I use to improve my efficiency with planning is using Google Slides as my planning book. I do most of my planning in one place, creating a ready-to-use slide deck with my students as they go. It's easy to duplicate for each week. I do not have to recreate anything. I just fine-tune things as we grow. I have exemplars and organizers linked, so I can quickly touch and display and use them for modeling. I can use predictable visuals and color coding to support students who need help with transitions and getting organized. If working with multiple educators, we can co-plan easier and check in on others' days to help facilitate connections between the content areas. You can click through the example and see the gist of how I use this template. The example does not have everything hyperlinked as it would normally do, but it still gives you an example. You'll notice how simple the template is. As much fun as cartoons, funny GIFs, and beautiful fonts are, these elements take up vital space in working memory. This slideshow is to facilitate learning and make instruction easier, not overload the working memories of our students. It is not perfect, and it might not be the best tool for everyone, depending on what you have available to you, but it works well for me in my context. One of my favorite Archerisms by Anita Archer is, if you expect it, pre-correct it. We all face different management problems throughout the day. This quote reminds me that if something is consistently causing us stress or delays, I can make instructional decisions to avoid or limit that distraction. These are a few of the challenges I have faced and how I have problem solved to overcome them. A visual schedule. I have a pocket chart visual schedule, and it is embedded in my Google Slides. I color code the steps in my slides to match the students' duotangs and use predictable images on what type of partner reading they are expected to do. These little things make a big difference for students who need it. When I photocopy some things for the week, I might color code it for that week. This is not to make it dyslexia friendly, as tinted lenses, fonts, and colors is not an evidence-based support for dyslexia. But the color coding does support executive functioning and organization skills. I photocopy in booklets. Since we do spelling every day, I do not give students one piece of paper at a time. I copy the sheets and I staple them into 3 to 4 double-sided booklets. These booklets are more sturdy than one piece of paper, so for students with fine motor difficulties, it makes it a bit easier for them to put them into their duotangs independently. It also saves time, as we are only restocking our duotangs every other week and not daily. I use the scan to email function on our photocopier. After I scoop complex sentences on our Fluency passage, I'll scan it to PDF so I can show the exact same visual display on my panel as the students have on their page. It's a little thing that makes a big difference for students with executive functioning difficulties. I create a bi-weekly partners chart. I will select our partners for the next 2 weeks based on my instructional plans. I now even have locations around the room labeled where they can work with partners. This improves the overall efficiency in my classroom. It is expected and practiced that we can be a kind and effective partner with all of our peers. Lastly, my table and desk arrangement. I have used both. I will say now I much prefer desks. Either way, your arrangement needs to be set up that they are looking forward toward the educator. The educator is providing the instruction and leading the class. The students need the physical arrangement so they can be successful with that. Lastly, breathe, reflect, move forward. We all have days where we face more challenges than normal. Continue forward. And if it becomes something you expect, come up with a plan to pre-correct. As we conclude, I want to emphasize again our purpose for this session. We wanted to learn about important research that helps us become an evidence-informed educator. We discussed essential literacy skills and how they can be organized into instructional routines. Our focus was on 2 critical ideas: how to maximize student learning and optimize educator workload. Both of these ideas are critical to ensure all students and educators feel successful with the learning and teaching of these essential literacy skills. To finish, I want to share these words from Timothy Shanahan. Research-based approaches don't work. They are made to work. They are made to work by teachers like you and me, and all the things teachers do every day to increase the success of our students. We have discussed today about some of the ways we can provide evidence-informed literacy instruction in our classrooms, but it can only be made effective by the intentional instructional decisions made by thoughtful teachers like you. Now I can see lots of stuff going in the Q&A in the chat, but I have no idea what
to say. I know.
Can't see any of it. So
take a moment, Laura, have a breather, because I know how much it is to talk for, you know, a while straight. So take a moment. I think, I'm not sure if you've been able to see the reactions popping up, but you've been getting a whole lot of love with everything you've shared. If you are okay answering a few questions, I know we're at time, but I do just know that there are so many questions here that I want to make sure that we pass those along to you, and there are lots of great ones. So I was just wondering, I know you mentioned that you were really purposeful about how you set up your partners. I was just wondering if you could just elaborate on that a little bit. Somebody mentioned that they, you know, how do you manage students making the right choice for a partner without having to micromanage what students should or can or can't work together? This person has a very chatty class that can get off task, and then it can snowball from there. I know that you had mentioned a little bit about that, but I was just wondering if you could just pull that together a bit more.
yeah. And actually in the partner reading, making effective video that we linked, I do discuss this in there as well. So if you go by the research, a researcher would say to do database partners, but I talk in the video about how we can't have kids have the same partner all year. We have these students for 10 months. So I try to be really intentional and look ahead at our schedule. So if I see that we have 2 weeks straight, no disruptions, then I'm going to do those database partners and be really intentional about my instruction. If I see going forward, like, oh, it's March break is coming up, it's mixed in there, then I might throw in some social partners because everyone deserves to get a chance to work together. But then at least I'm not taking as much instructional time up for that. So I'll try to be purposeful when I pick those times. Sometimes my partners, I might set them up for a certain strategy I want to teach them or a certain extra little lesson. Sometimes I might set up my partners to be like 2 groups of 2 that I'm going to, during that 2 minutes of partner reading, I'm going to grab both those groups and we're doing a group of 4 together. So there's, that's some of the ways I do it. I get my kids to write like once a month, 2 people they want to sit with on a piece of paper. And I tell them it doesn't mean they get to sit with them, but I will try to maybe make them their partners. But in the end, it's my decision. But I do try to give them that choice a little bit. But I just try to be targeted about when I let them be with certain partners.
That makes sense. And just along the same line, which I know you and I talked about, and it actually didn't make it into the final webinar because we were mindful of time, but are those activities self-selected? Do students select their activities? How do you manage that selection process of where students go in the rotations?
Oh, okay. So yeah, we call it rotations, but there's really no rotating. It was kind of a poorly chose name for that. I use like a Google slide that I've turned into a sign-in sheet, and we tried to make it that we could share it tonight. We still maybe can later.
I can put it out.
And so when students come in the morning, they sign in on the panel for, there's reading, writing, partner, and tech. And I only let 2 sets of partners go in a rotation. Just it gets too loud if you let too many do it at once. And I let 5 kids use tech. So I have enough Chromebooks for that. And that way we do 2 rotations. So that means they should get tech every other day. So those are my rules. Reading and writing, you can do every day. And partner and tech, you have to do it every other day. And it seems to be manage itself fine. It can depend on your group. Last year, my class needed a lot more support doing these things. So I kind of had to stand there in the morning, drinking my coffee and help them sign in when they came in. But this year they're really independent. So it's fabulous this year.
A couple more questions. And I know we're not going to get to everybody's question. And for that, I really do apologize. But Laura, maybe if you could jump ahead 1 slide, I will just remind everybody that we have a wonderful, fabulous team. We call them our curriculum assistance team, and they are fabulous, phenomenal Ontario educators. So I'm going to ask Laura a couple more questions, but I'm just mindful of everybody's time, especially on a really busy Tuesday starting into October. So I want to make sure we all get off at a good time tonight. How many... So please feel free, if we don't get to your question, please send it to us through email, and Laura or one of our wonderful educators will manage to support you. How many groups do you work with in that teacher piece? Is that something where you work with every group, or how does that work? How many groups do you work with, and how do you sort of strategize and prioritize for that?
So for that, I use my data to determine what my groups are. I don't necessarily have every kid come to my group. If a child is at benchmark and doesn't need that additional dosage of tier 1, they are getting what they need just with my tier 1 instruction. So the kids that I have picked for my small groups are kids that need additional dosage to get them where I need to get them. I also, one thing I've started collaborating with some of the CERT in our building that certain kids, it's hard for them to transition to go and get extra help. So what I've started doing is I like taking all my kids that struggle with transition. So then I keep them right in the room and then we do it together. And then maybe my kids that just need a little bit extra, I can just get someone to read with them in the hallway quickly. But basically it depends on your data, how many groups you do. I try to make them, I don't want to teach the same lesson 3 times in a day. So right now I'm running 2 groups, but each group has 5 kids in it.
I'm just thinking of another resource that might link to this. I think we might have it in the online resource, but the wonderful Dr. Jamie Peefler, who you mentioned earlier, does have a webinar about optimizing small group instruction. There is a recording somewhere on YouTube. We might have it in the resource library. If we don't, we should. But for anyone who's wanting to dig more into small group, I think that'd be a great place to start. And then Laura, I'll give you one last question. I just think this is a nice one to end on, and it's a really interesting one. If an educator is using a resource that might not have that type of those many opportunities for respond, or that structure for active responding for students, is that something that you think, like, how do you think they should approach that? Perhaps, like, is that, you mentioned that this was not something that you were trained to do, this was something that you had to sort of effortfully develop and practice and work through the kinks. Is that something you would encourage other educators to do, or how could they work with what they've got instructionally? Is there an opportunity for that?
I would definitely look into like the explicit instruction module on ONlit and anything in eDarcher. When you learn how to teach well and how to provide instruction, explicit instruction well, then you can teach anything. So I think it's the one skill that now I can apply. It doesn't matter what I'm teaching, and it's got big impact. So I would look into how you can improve with that delivery.
Well, Laura Bross, I think I always say that I wish that you were one of my teachers when Laura Bross is just phenomenal and wonderful and a truly gifted educator. And I'm so thrilled that she shared how she sets up her classroom and how she is meeting all of her students' needs with us tonight. We will, as you know, the webinar is recorded, so we will send you out that recording once we've edited it, once it has been edited. And just so you know what's coming up for us, we at ONlit always have a lot of stuff on the go. And one of them, it just went onto the website yesterday or today. We are happy to continue, just knowing how much it seems like our community benefits from drop-ins and opportunities to connect with our educator team. So we will be offering CAT chats, curriculum assistance team chats, especially surrounding screening and data, knowing that that's something that has been really a big topic of conversation with PPM 168 coming into effect this fall. This is up on the site. We will have the French counterpart of this, I think, up on the site tomorrow. So if you're a French immersion educator, or if you're in if you're in a Francophone school, we've got you covered for that as well. But we'd love to see you there. Marlene Perry, Jordan Sloan, and special guests from the CAT team. I bet we could probably twist Laura's arm and get her to go to that too. But we hope to see you there. And as always, we are here to support. Feel free to reach out through email. But we thank you so much for your time tonight. It was wonderful to connect with you. And please send us an email if there's any other way we can support you. But we hope you all have a wonderful night. Thanks so much, everybody.